Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and I am doing my August trade and financial weather. Now, I'm not an economist, I'm not your financial advisor, and this is not a pipe. The outtake that I bring of astrology on these matters is something that you won't find in other places outside of astrology, because all the good tips about money, assets, and so on are just not inclusive of the actual transits that trigger them. And this is why I do this podcast. So, without further ado, when we talk about August, we're basically looking in general for transits that make hard aspects between the outer planets, Chiron, and hard aspects to the physical planets, which is Mercury, Mars, Venus. But also, in this August, just like in July, the Sun is ruling over Mercury, which rules over Uranus, and so the Sun becomes involved in our podcast as well. So, August 1, we begin with Venus squaring Saturn and Neptune. I'm going to talk not just about the issue, but also about the money blocks and how what we need to dissolve in order to dissolve the money blocks. And so, Venus squaring Saturn and Neptune. Venus is values. Venus is also cars and beauty. I know that I want to buy a certain lipstick that I will set on the color and I will set on the brand, and I'm like, I don't feel like putting anything that's not it. So that's the thing. So I'll go without if I don't have what I want. And so this is in just one of these transits. The square to Saturn can create both fated delays, but also expenses. Saturn rules fines. It can be somebody's being served. Saturn Neptune, there is some sort of helplessness around that. Okay, Neptune is about being helpless around something, and Venus square might mean that our values need a certain reality check, and it can be with the bank, it can be with our liquidity, which is Neptune. The interest rates might change or fluctuate in a way that makes it difficult to make a purchase. And so this one, the loss or the challenge might not be because we buy something, but because we are forced to pay something or forced to delay a purchase. Now let's talk about the money blocks involved. Sorry. Let's talk about the money blocks involved. There is wind in my hair and it's itching. My hair is itching. I don't know why. Neurodivergent. The money blocks involved. First of all, Saturn. Saturn rules over any slavery, debt-based mindset that you or your lineage have, and what those things create is stagnation, and with the conjoining of Neptune, viral fungi like Candida. Okay, Neptune is viral, Saturn is ruling over Pluto, which is fungi, and so if you have a block, it's coming to dissolve. That's the good news. But those type of patterns in the lineage and ancestry, Saturn rules debt and slavery, they can create certain stagnation. So you want to double check if you come from lineage that was enslaved before, and it doesn't mean that you are black. White people were enslaved before. Masonry are slaves, okay? The free Masons are slaves. So that is something that you want to tend to remediate or tend to resolve. If you have something like Candida, it might mean that your surrounding had been having such thing, or maybe your younger self had been having such things, and where your natal Saturn is and where Saturn is transiting right now, sovereignty. So very, very important. Even people that are in debt, their sovereignty cannot be taken away from them. And those lineages that had previous thoughts, outdated rules around debt, and so on and so forth, or that put people in debt to enslave them, that can create this type of money blocks. And that can create, okay, the struggle. And so you might deal with such a person, and that can be outdated with the values that, you know, that the current times are bringing, which is sovereignty, revolution, labor strike, decentralization of regimes, so more and more and more and more sovereignty. But you might be dealing with such a person that is bringing that outdated thing. And it can be unexpected because of the sextile to Uranus. So you might have known some people for some time, and you didn't think that they have this mindset, and then you're like, oh, okay. Those type of environments create, like I said, they create candida. And so you could also be treating candida, and you would need to buy things to treat candida. And the fact that and Neptune pertains to holistic healing. I just ran into the fact that that American doctors prescribe estrogen for endo, which basically means the endo. They have estrogen. They grow. That's the problem. They grow estrogen, and so what is prescribed is estrogen with the pills to treat endo. And it was actually an Italian couple that is having IVF, the Pessinis, that said, well, in Italy and Europe, the consensus is actually different, not with estrogen, which coincides. I don't know anything about what medicine they used other than the estrogen component. I'm not an MD. But from aromatherapy perspective, I remember we studied certain oils, and they say they induce estrogen. We do not give them in endo. And that was like, or any estrogen related issues. So that was like estrogen. And so for some of you, you may find out at this time that you need to purchase another drug, particularly if you've been dealing in that case with something like candida. Yes, with the Jupiter square, it may be something like endo or even cancer. And you might find out you need completely different drugs, and that can create a fated result. Or you can get in debt for this because you might need a completely different medicine and medical treatment. Particularly if you grew up in places where, and this can result in you finding out that your medical insurance, Saturn, actually needs to be changed. Or if your medical insurance doesn't cover what you need to be healthy, or doesn't cover any of what you need to be healthy, then perhaps it's an expense that you would want to take down. And so this actually happened following COVID in Israel. Many people stopped paying medical insurance because they looked into the depth of things, and they were like, oh, what actually helps me is not funded, and what doesn't is something that, you know, that is what is listed in the medical insurance. So it can be something that is a combination of you have to pay something fatedly, you have to change, you have to pay for medicine, and at the same time you decide to let go of because of the change of value. So when you make that step, you might be rewarded with actually less expenses. There's something very curative about Neptune. It's a crisis, but it's a crisis that also brings curation. Then we have, so I addressed, Neptune. Neptune money blocks have to do with mafia, scams, secret societies. With Saturn Neptune, it can be secret curses, okay? So it's more difficult to diagnose, and holistic perspective. For me, only when I turned, I think Uranus was going over my ascendant, and only when I turned to astrology of my natal chart did I discover that there was something missing. Neptune is something missing in all the ways in which I have taken care of my health, even holistically in the past. So that was one discovery that was like, oh, it was astro.com. It's like, oh, they mentioned absorbing energy of others. Nobody else did. And now other people do, but back a decade and a half ago, nobody did, where I was around. So Neptune can be that missing component, the tending to the missing. It can be a pain around loss or that something is missing in the life. Saturn, Neptune can be missing father, okay? So there can be a grief around that, or someone that is missing. And by the way, it's not necessarily the death of, it can also be with somebody is away and they even be a career person and they can be missing. Those type of things can create something that is missing and you're longing to, and they create a juxtaposition of longing to, if it is on the finance level, longing to material security, or having material security but something is missing, and that creates addictions. But it can also, as we sit with the void, it can also, and tend to what is missing, can also have a curative, miraculous healing, which may be in a situation where, oh, you've healed that emotional wound and now you don't need to spend so much money on your addiction, okay? So it can be in that situation, or in a situation where there is miraculous curation, and it comes with miraculous curation to your finances as well. But with the square to Venus, that can be a missing connection. A missing connection with the father, or certain type of secret society that doesn't allow connection with the father, because Venus is connection and Saturn Neptune is yes, a father, and that can be associated with military or military situation. So for some people, this is the money block behind the issue. August 7, Sun squares Lilith in Scorpio. And Sun square Lilith, right now, for example, Sun is on Procyon, so this is a great time to turn to our health and to the patriarchal lineage and curate that. This is also a good time for leaders and fathers to have this introspection, where they begin to look into themselves and understand, or have eurekas and epiphanies that can pertain also to their heart health. And even resolve things, because Procyon is the great denucleaficator, okay? Sun is ruling over Mercury, and Mercury is ruling over Uranus. This is why the Sun is a participant in our financial astrology. Sun squaring Lilith, there can be a health expanse because of themes to do with sexual sovereignty. And so yes, it can range all the way from extortion calls, filing, extortion on somebody and they have to pay money. Like, it can really be like that. Or the issue of sexual sovereignty causes someone to pay something, or something, some expenses for the health. It can even be you're dealing with someone that is sexually sovereign or is working for the sexual sovereignty, and because you thought that you're going to be relying on them in another way, you're having a heartbreak, or like this, that is actually something that can absolutely happen, because right now Lilith is talking about sexual sovereignty, but it's not like sexual sovereignty is a prevalent existence in our world, and this is why those can be the expenses. Another thing is that, let's say you want to be sexually sovereign, and then there is issue with the heart function that is harming your ability to have pleasure, okay? And so that can create a situation where, to compensate for that pleasure, you might spend money on other things that are supposed to compensate for that. So yes, it's a sensitive topic, it's an intricate topic, but we think about the what the Sun is ruling, that is Mercury. Mercury is ruling over Uranus and Sedna, and so this is where the industries of work are going through their revolutionary phase, and that can be in the health services as well. This is in an indirect way also, much like Saturn, anything that is affected by slavery. For example, I was going to the supermarket and the air condition was not so good. And I was like, for me, it's not that bad. I'm here for 2 minutes, but the people that have an 8-hour shift here, and we began to talk, and I was like, why don't you have like a strike around that? And I said, well, the Clalit workers, which is an HMO, they began to strike. And I was like, that makes so much sense that we're having this conversation. because wherever I go, Uranus is right now in my fourth house, but the ruler is in the second. And this happened with the supermarket worker. Second is both income, but also when you go to the grocery store. So this was like, oh, that reminded me of the time when I was working before academia. And there was, every time I go to work, there is a revolution. I may or may not be the catalyzer. Okay? So every single place, I make a revolution wherever I go. And so this is, yeah. And so that can, in an indirect way, be related to this topic. The revolution causes you a situation where you have to spend more money on something. And the square with Lilith that wants sexual sovereignty can come about in a way where people are already meeting discomfort, and then Lilith comes up with this even more discomfort. So the blocks, like I said, anything that is an impediment on sexual sovereignty, so the entire earth. And and the solution is combining the value of sexual sovereignty with the value of social revolution that eventually is meant to ensure that. Now, why that can be in square relations? Because the rebellious people might got to that because they have families and they need to support the families. Lilith in Scorpio might not be on that trajectory, okay? Because Scorpio is a very challenging transformation, and sexual sovereignty here might be the satanic ritual abuse survivors, might be the people that don't have even family or children, or that their children were taken away, or something like really horrid of that sort. So this is August 7, and this is why the sun can give us unusual expenses. It can also be in a situation where, let's say you have a supermarket, you go, you want to pay your employees and so on, and then somebody escaped human trafficking and they steal from the supermarket, and now you're in a problem because they have diplomatic immunity, and rightfully so, and for them you are a life threat, and for you, you're like, oh, I'm just trying to build up my pricing, or to have better pricing, or to take care of the stealing problem so that I can pay my employees. And so that can be another square. August, let's continue with the Augusts here. August 10, Venus square Saturn and Neptune. So we had, no, oh, we said, wait. Mars, sorry, I knew that. Mars square Saturn and Neptune. So Venus square Saturn and Neptune, we talked about in August 1. Mars square Saturn and Neptune is a challenge from another point of view. Mars is ruling over real estate, business, and Saturn, Neptune can be liquidation. There can be liquidation of currency. Remember the dissolving euros in the ATMs? Now they want to turn to a digital euro, and they might do another move like that. So we might have dissolving cash, and that might enforce people to go to the bank. Again, Saturn is something karmic, so it can absolutely be that. August 10, don't get money out of the ATM on August 10, okay? Try to avoid that if you can. Or you might get change that is, dissolved in some way if you're using cash. There can be a credit hoax, because Saturn rules credit and Mars rules banking, real estate, and money transactions. They can be a credit scam, a credit hoax, identity theft, and there can be expenses along that line that begin some sort of a crisis that will have some duration. Another thing is that there can be unexpected expense on a real estate. For example, there is war in Israel. Many tenants insure themselves legally that if there is a war, they do not have to pay the rent. So first of all, they don't need to do that because this is the law. And secondly, all those people that were applying for a force majeure, that means that the landowner does not get compensation, and this means force majeure. War is force majeure, and it's being acknowledged in force majeure. And so, and if you ask me why, because in Israel the Declaration of Independence has Kvod Adam v'Cheruto v'Chofesh Ha'isuk, which means you cannot traffic people, which is an international thing. Okay, diplomatic immunity is being removed from traffickers. That might cause expenses. But those who escape human trafficking have diplomatic immunity. I gave the tip many times in each of my channel. Remember that when you escape trafficking, you have diplomatic immunity. If you participate in trafficking, if you recruit for trafficking knowingly, then this is something where your diplomatic immunity is removed. And so and that is okay, that is important, so that there can be hoax and identity thefts around those issues. But again, if somebody is escaping trafficking, it's kind of like you can't really litigate them, and in a war, people are basically escaping being trafficked. That is why it's a force majeure, and this is also something that can cause unexpected expenses. If there is the floods, okay, floods is naturally force majeure, so people don't have to pay rent and they don't have to pay mortgage, and this is what people don't know. Okay, force majeure does not compensate for mortgage. It means that the bank is not compensated for mortgage, and this is something that is coinciding with the currency dissolution. Now, a lot of people don't know their rights. Okay, slavery is illegal. It is illegal. It's globally illegal. And so this is something that informing that is not about giving legal advice to people. It's about knowledge from experience, and sharing the rights is something that is not legal advice. It's something that is actually duty. The rights should be transparent to everyone. Sharing the rights that people have is transparency, and it's not legal advice. So this is where okay, Mars square Saturn Neptune, it can be such a case. Of course, if people lost their house in a flood, this is not what they think about at that moment, but this is something that unfortunately can happen. And another thing is the block. So we talked about Saturn Neptune blocks, and let's talk about Mars blocks. Mars, the wealth blocks that involve Mars: brotherhoods, humiliation rituals, and sexual dysfunction. Okay, so that is go without saying, is something that hurts sexual function. It's happening, it's a part of a feminization ritual in the brotherhoods, which is a humiliation ritual, and is done between men and men. Also to women, but first it begins with the men. And this can cause lack of libido and hyperlibido. It's basically sexual violence. Okay, so the results of sexual violence and the aftermath of sexual violence are the money blocks. And yes, that can cause erectile dysfunction, sex addiction, blood flow issues, misconception about blood. Again, brotherhoods, they go by bloodline, although the higher ranks take plasma medication, which is taken from the blood of people that are absolutely not from that bloodline. And this is where misconception about blood, any type of epigenetics and stuff that is working on inbreeding. Okay, I'm not talking about biodiversity, I'm talking about inbreeding. This is something that can cause a lot of money blocks. Okay, if you ask, why would anybody try to enslave all humanity for money and have unhappy marriage, unhappy life, unhappy this, unhappy that? It's that. They have misconceptions around blood that create inbreeding, that creates inability to be satisfied, also sexually. This is why we have expandable children projects, and this is what we need to tend to as humanity to dissolve these blockages. Okay, so those are Mars related